Well, thank you for everybody joining us today. We're just going to go ahead and get started and jump right in here. Today, we're speaking on a topic and sharing our journey and pulling out some principles we've learned over about 20 years of doing this. Specifically, as the market has changed a little bit and bootstrapping is now a little more popular than it was a couple years ago. And some principles that we've learned in that journey and to share those with you. So as we go through this process, I'm going to be sharing a bit from the technical side, and Lloyd's going to be sharing a little bit on the business side to give you the flavors of both of those. So quick little introduction. My name is Rhett. I'm a co-founder of LoanPro. Other than my family, my true love is product. So I'm a product person through and through, and today for the conversation, I'll be giving that lens.
Hello, everyone. Good to see all of you, especially you guys in the back there. It's awesome. Happy to be here. My name is Lloyd Roberts. Rhett and I are brothers, and we actually have a third brother as well, Ben, who isn't here today, but also co-founded LoanPro. So super excited about that. A little bit about our background. We've been doing business together for 20 years. Every business we've done together. It's been a bumpy, fun road all along. Some of my passions are, I wrote a book called G Cubed that focuses on achieving personal fulfillment in this life. And then for the whole journey, I've been over the revenue team until recently. The last 6 months, I'm no longer over the revenue team, and I'm focusing more on a public charity that we started called Become More.
Awesome. So we're going to kind of spend just a couple of minutes to share our background with you and the journey that we went through, with the intent to be able to share a series of stories and some technical experiences that we've had that might be of benefit to you. And we thought it would be the most helpful to give you kind of a timeline. So the background on the company is I did education in investment finance. Got out of school, wondered, what in the world am I going to do? Went back to Wall Street. And about that time, as I got married and decided, I've always been bit by the entrepreneur bug. Let's go give this thing a try. And so I joined my two brothers, Ben and Lloyd, and we started a car dealership. Had no idea what we were doing. And we started in the space of buying and selling cars, and we identified the opportunity we could sell a lot more cars if we could get a cohort of our customers financed. And at that time, they had subprime and prime and a pretty big gap in the middle, not a great way to finance people. And so we started what's fairly commonplace today, but quite rare back then, of a related finance company. Got into the auto lending space and just fell in love with lending. Everything about it from a business side and understanding. We had a new problem as we scaled our portfolio of being a lender. The software to manage the loan portfolio was very stuck in 1980. It was challenging. We needed like 6 different pieces of software, and you had to create an orchestration layer to connect them for a unified user experience. And we just had this big question, why? Why does it work like that? And as we went out to the market to search to see what others were doing, we were really surprised that seemed to be what almost everybody was doing. And in part being reasonably naive, we just thought, well, let's just go ahead and build it. And didn't have background in software, didn't have a background in technology, but we had a problem and a deep understanding of that problem. And ours was a little different than others, and this will make sense later while I'm describing it. The problem we were solving, see, we didn't have an issue sourcing, underwriting, and deciding on the loan. We owned the car dealerships. It was reasonably easy to do the underwriting side for us. Our problem was we wanted a portfolio to be highly performant. Or said another way, our problem is we got to get our money back. And we need to do it in a way that's convenient and compliant and supports the portfolio being performant. So we did that. We built an internal tool to our own lending company, and that was the intent of it. Others reached out and said, hey, that's pretty cool. Can I use that? And we said, nope, sorry. This is like the key differentiator. This is our special secret sauce of the business. And to our surprise, we don't really know how it came about. There's like 30 or so folks over about a 2-year period who kind of heard about it and said, hey, can I use that? Eventually, we decided they're all offering us to give us money. Let's take their money and see what happens. And in that journey, so it's sort of a similar model you've heard a lot of companies have where they build a solution for an internal product and then that solution actually turns into the business. Think of Slack's story, right? Very interesting on how that tool, they were going to be a video game company, and they built an internal communication tool, if you're familiar with Slack, and that's what the business turned into be. Sort of same thing with us. We had a deep understanding of our own problem. And so you can see the rest of the timeline. We built a few versions of the software, learned a few things along the way. And for this talk, we did it as bootstrapping. So we took the business, the profits from the dealerships, and rolled it into lending, and then rolled it the next one. And it takes a certain process to do that.
Yeah, one thing I'd add there, if anyone in here is considering starting a business and bootstrapping it, or if you're already doing so, there's really a couple questions that I think are really helpful in the process. And it's more of a mindset thing, right? So I had somebody come to me a couple weeks ago, right? You can see here that we took $100 million off the table a couple years ago. And so we'll get people to come to us and say, hey, got the world's best idea. All I need is your capital. Right? So that will happen a decent amount. And I had a good buddy come to me about a month ago, and he did the same thing. And it was a good idea. But then I asked him what his end objective was. And he wanted to grow a big business. He wanted to own the majority of the company. He had a lot of big ambitions. So I asked him, what if you could start this company, but it was impossible for you to raise money? What would you do? Would you even start it? Or would you move on to something else? And he said that he would still start it. And I said, okay, well, what if you want to really truly bootstrap this business, not give away a big piece of your company early on, how do you go about solving your problems if you don't use somebody else's money to insert into your business to be able to solve those problems? So I'm not saying that bootstrapping is the right strategy for everybody, but it was for us, right? And it worked out well for us, where until 2021, we were completely bootstrapped. And then at that point, we were able to take a couple chips off the table. And at that point, keep the majority ownership of the business.
So I guess the highlight there is the being a revenue-backed company requires that your roadmap's a little bit different than if you're having the infusion of external capital. And that's part of the journey and story that we wanted to share today. So we've extracted through our almost 20 years of doing this, 7 principles that we would like to highlight. And now that we've given you the timeline, we wanted to go through and use our journey, but speak about those principles. And I love stories. I think most people learn through stories. So we're going to share a series of stories. And some of these are kind of personal, but hopefully they really resonate and connect with you of what that journey has looked like.
All right, look at those strapping young men from 15 years ago. I tell you what, in front of that used car lot trailer. Look how well those pieces fit together of that. And the front end is amazing. It's a long time ago. So here with Principle 1, I want to really go kind of through what it means to understand a problem, how to be curious in solving that, and how to use data when you do solve that. So back in this day, we had a couple auto dealerships in the state of Utah. Just used car lots with $5,000 to $10,000 vehicles, and we wanted to sell more, as you'd imagine every dealership does, right? And we found out that a lot of the applications, they were getting denied by banks, credit unions, lenders of all shapes and sizes, and these were customers that maybe had a thin credit file, but they were good humans. They had a down payment. They most of the time had a job, and it seemed like these would be people that should qualify for a loan of some kind. But there was a gap in the market for some of these people. So we understood the problem. The problem was we wanted to double the amount of cars that we could sell at these multiple dealerships. But the solution was still, it eluded us for a period of time. So we went and met with different lenders. We tried to figure out their credit profile better so that we could meet those criteria. And at the end of the day, none of that worked. And so we decided, well, what if we start our own lending company, an auto lending business, where we could see these humans, good people that needed loans and needed cars, and they had down payments, but they're still getting rejected. What could we tweak to be able to increase the likelihood that these borrowers would pay us back? So we went and we leaned into the data. What was a differentiator that was independent of the credit bureaus that would increase this likelihood, so therefore we could start a related finance company? And we found out that the data said that it was not only the down payment, that was number one, the amount they put down. Okay, great, 20% down, we got that. Most of these customers would have this. But second, it was the vehicle. Wasn't their job, wasn't their credit worthiness, all these other factors that are typically built into your FICO score. It was the vehicle, primarily vans, Hondas and Toyota vans, family vehicles, vehicles that we relied on, one that they didn't want to let go, and also Subarus. So what did we do? We changed our inventory. And now we bought vans that we could sell for in the $5,000 to $10,000 range, primarily Hondas and Toyotas and Subarus as well. And we were able to create a related finance company that generated millions in profits, and for both the dealership and for the lending company. And that was by understanding the problem and then being curious and willing to think out of the box, and then looking at the data so that our end result is what we wanted. And if it wasn't, we were able to iterate.
So a technical example of that was, as we got into the lending business, we had a challenge that the software that we used to do the calculations, you'd like print your contracts using something that would generate your TILA disclosures, your amortization schedule. You'd use another system to move real money in the real world, another system that actually does the amortization on the servicing, and the numbers didn't exactly match. With a background of finance, it just drove me nuts. This should be exactly matching, not like within an eighth tolerance, and there's the differences. And so being very curious about that problem, I dug in, and one example is on APR. So OCC publishes a tool called APR Win. Up until a couple years ago, it was a desktop thing you would download, and they don't publish a formula for it. Right? You got to go in and figure out what it is. And it takes into consideration irregularities in the first period, a calendar, if they're bumpy, say you're on monthly, 31 or 28 days. It takes into consideration an underwriting fee. And everyone assumes it's like an IRR calculation, but it was like IRR built from a table in 1968. So it's not like really an IRR, it's an APR. And so APR is an output value, and most folks assume that's like an input value, like a nominal interest rate. Well, it turns out a bunch of softwares out there in the auto lending space where you generate your contracts from print in the TILA disclosure box for APR, they print nominal interest rate. Well, that's like a huge compliance problem and a huge concern for us. So I dug in and, being curious, figured out, how do you do this? We're really proud now. We match APR Win 4 decimals deep in all corner cases. In the process, we found multiple bugs in APR Win itself. Submitted those to the government. We never heard back from them on that, but the new version they published online actually has those solved in it. So just really digging in and figuring that out. Why that matters is today, because of the journey we went through, we have a feature in our software called targeted APR. And almost every financial product out there is marketed with an APR, and then they back off of what the actual nominal interest rate is, and they box the scenarios of difference between the contract date and the first due date so that they can't move all the way up to pass the tolerance of the APR. Mostly because they can't do the math the right way. So we provide the tool that you tell me what's the APR you want, and I already have the schedule, I know the dates, the calendars, all back in. Am I adjusting the underwriting fee? Am I adjusting the interest rate? Now, it sounds like that might just be a formula. It's actually, in some circumstances, a formula. It gets a little more complicated in a formula because in consumer lending, you can't capitalize the interest. So go for a corner case. Your first period is so long and irregular, you accrue more interest than your payment amount. Well, formula doesn't work really well for that one, right? You got to go run through a nested iteration process. So really being curious and digging into the details that in these circumstances, formulas work. In other circumstances, you have to solve it in another way. All right, so this is the second principle. In bootstrapping a business, you've got to ship. You have to ship it. So I hope some of you have seen this commercial before, and this is one of my favorites.
Ship my pants? Right here? Ship my pants, you're kidding.
You can ship your pants right here.
You hear that? I can ship my pants for free.
Wow, I just may ship my pants.
Yeah, ship your pants. Billy, you can ship your pants too.
I can't wait to ship my pants, Dad.
I just shipped my pants, and it's very convenient.
Very convenient.
I just shipped my drawers.
I just shipped my nightie.
I just shipped my bed.
If you can't find what you're looking for in store, we'll find it at kmart.com right now and ship it to you for free.
Awesome. So we thought that's super funny.
Ship
right?
my pants.
Oh, let's see.
Right here? Ship my pants, you're kidding.
You can ship.
All right, so you have to ship products. So there's a quote there, Reid Hoffman. As you build product, you have to build it in such a way that you ship. and you deliver and you provide the design. So a few things that we've done, we operate in a CI/CD. We didn't always do that. Our earliest version of things was kind of super embarrassing. You get in and say, like, our very first version, remember, it's an internal tool, we would edit live code in production. Like do everything wrong. And I'm sure I see this resonating with a few of you. You go through an iteration process, because if the tool is going to be internal tool used by one person, you don't even know if you're going to use it anyways. Do you spend all of the time building everything around the infrastructure before you actually ever ship anything? And so as you get more sophisticated and build these things, so Lloyd's got a couple of examples of a few things that we're kind of embarrassed about, but you ship.
Yeah, and remember, we're talking about bootstrapping a business, right? So as a bootstrap business, we need to generate profits so we could use those profits to continue to grow the business. And so you're shipping things like your pants when maybe you didn't really want to yet, right? So from the sales side of things, to the revenue side, that creates some problems. Now we have a product that is surely subpar at best that we're trying to take to market, but that's necessary to generate that revenue to continue that cycle. So early on in the days, when we had a couple, we were able to convince the first about 24 lenders that it is an okay business practice to only accept payments on the 1st and the 15th of the month, because we hard-coded the software that was the only option, because that's how we did it at our lending company. Right? We thought, it was okay. And so I had to convince a couple dozen to do it that way and change their whole business practice, and they effectively did. And then I'm like, hey, guys, we gotta open this up a little bit for me. You're making it kind of hard, right? Also, the only payment frequency at first was monthly. Couldn't do anything else inside the platform, right? Of course, we've made it, we've adjusted to make it very modular thereafter. But also, when we moved from our first version of lending software to our second version of lending software that focuses more on enterprise-type lenders, this was a transition that was exciting, but it was also really painful. We ended up courting a contractor for the U.S. State Department that serviced all the loans for refugees coming to America. And we were able to get a multi-million-dollar contract signed by them 6 months before they had the ability to log in to the software that they had just purchased. Right? So this can cause some real issues to ship things before it's actually ready. But to realize what you're actually selling is you're selling the ability to solve their problem. Not the problem that you want to solve for them, but their actual problem. And in that process, you're selling confidence, right? That you understand their problem, you are trustworthy, your organization is trustworthy, that you have their back, you're in their corner, and the confidence of that partnership, instead of just a vendor-customer relationship, it's really a partnership that you're not going to leave them hanging, you're actually going to solve their perceived problems.
Awesome. Thanks, Lloyd. So that's going to play that just again.
Shit my pants.
All right, so the third principle is to take strategic risks, but not just on anything, particularly on new innovation. So if you've got $1, where are you going to spend that dollar, right? You can spend it on what you do today, a near adjacency, or that third horizon of it's going to change. It's going to change something that's meaningful. Think of Clayton Christensen's book, The Innovator's Dilemma. And as you make those investments, where are you doing? So AWS launched in 2006. We started using AWS in Q1 of 2007. Early adopter. If you've played in AWS, it was not then what it is now, right? Early days, it was basically S3, not as cool as it is now, kind of EC2, and kind of RDS. And nothing else. There was no Lambda functions, no step functions, nothing, no serverless, anything. And so as we built into that, that was a strategic risk for us to build in the cloud, but then we can iterate so much faster. As we built into that, since then, as new products have been released within the stack, we've been able to break apart a monolith and go in. We're a heavy consumer of Lambda functions. We're a heavy consumer of sequenced SQS processes. We do all these technical things, but it's first you have to live for another day. And if you can live for another day, then you have the luxury of continuing to iterate. When you're running in a bootstrapped methodology of how you run the fundamentals of the business, the first thing you have to solve for is to live for another day. And you have to do that at the same time you're looking at the long horizon of how can I build a world of how it ought to be? How should it really work? That's where to put your strategic investment. If you can put $1 into changing the world, how it ought to be, not just complying with how it is or an understanding of what happened in the past, but how ought it to work, that's where to put the strategic investment. We've done this on a number of areas, but in particular, AWS I thought was a great technical example, but it's about an educated risk. It's not just having an elevated level of risk, it's about making a very educated risk. In the technology side, this is really beneficial because there's a pretty fast feedback loop. And you can do this concept of take exploratory programming and take that methodology and apply it to anything within the business lines, where if you wait until you have concrete knowledge of the conclusion, you've already missed your opportunity window, right? You need to know directionally where you're going. You need to know the best you can there, but you got to get started. One of my favorite quotes, right, from the Bible is, when the Red Sea was parted by Moses, at first it was after he stepped into the water. It wasn't after he just showed up and like, cool, it's split, right? It requires a step of faith to actually step in and take action in that way.
Okay, number 4 is bend time and be creative. And the first thing I'd like to highlight here is the choice to be all in. Look, starting a business and bootstrapping, these are big choices and they're big decisions, and doing one foot in, one foot out typically doesn't work out super well. Remember in the early days, we were in the car lot days, man, we had no money at all. Literally taking $1,000 a home a month with a mortgage and a wife and 2 sets of twins, and it was like stressful, right? Well, one morning I got up and I couldn't sleep, so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go into work. Well, it was 3 o'clock in the morning, so I got to work and I turned on the open sign and I started doing paperwork from the night before, and 3:30, somebody knocked on the car lot door. So I opened the door and he's like, I saw your open signs on. Are you really open? And I'm like, yes, I am. And by 4 o'clock, he had done a test drive and bought a car. So when Rhett got in the office at about 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm like, good morning. I've already sold a car today. And he's like, what? So, being all in, it's a big deal to make sure that you're successful. And that's you and the people that you're with. There's another experience where you saw kind of the timeline. At a point, we were doing auto dealerships. We were doing a lending company. And that included people that didn't pay, so sometimes you need to do repossessions, and we had just started the software business, and it was new to us. So one day, we work all day at the car lot, we close the car lot, put up the chain, we already have a truck and trailer ready, we're in the state of Utah, and we leave. We start our voyage from Utah to Oakland, California, to arrive at 4 o'clock in the morning to repo a car that has a GPS in it. So we know exactly where it is, but it's in Oakland, California, on the street at 4 o'clock in the morning as we put this car up on the trailer, just to drive to Southern California to repo another car that hadn't paid, just to drive to Las Vegas to switch into our $199 Mr. Mac matching suits to debut our software at a trade show. So you gotta pick how you spend your time, right? Because if you don't fill your time with things that are important to you, I can guarantee you others will pick what's important to them, and they'll fill your time with that.
Awesome. On the be creative, we thought this would be some fun stories from the earlier days. We'd have customers come in to the car lot, and we would require X down payment, and they would have inadequate funds to make that down payment. And so instead of just walking away from the deal, on the be creative side, we'd say, like, what else do you have that's of value that you're willing to part with that I assign value to? We got some weird stuff. Right? We had one customer that his job was to be an Alaska fisherman. And he would go up for months on end to Alaska, and he lived in Utah, and he came on down. Happened to be, we took $1,500 of value in down payment in boxes and boxes of king crab legs. I came home to my wife, and I'm like, we don't have money to buy chicken, but here's a giant box of king crab legs that we're going to have. Right? We took like a canoe. We took a horse. That was a bad one. Right? A horse is super expensive to feed and take care of and pasture, and then you just got to get rid of it because we didn't know how to do it. So we did all of these things, and the idea is you got to think outside of the box when you're trying to bootstrap something. it's not always going to work the way that it says it's going to work on paper. You've got to adjust and do an audible, this exploratory programming concept. You think you know until you know a lot, and then you realize you really don't know very much at all. And that's all of us go through that journey. So bending time, right? The 2,000-hour rule, this concept, like, you just got to put in the time. You got to take a whole career and condense it into 10 years. And it's by putting the time and being committed. It's by choosing the important things to do. But then it's also have fun with it. Laugh every day. Be creative. Try stuff. See if it's going to work. You don't know unless you try that. All right, the fifth principle here is about platforms and products. Now, let's think about it. I'm trying to do this analogy not just from a technical platform, but think about what is a platform, right? It's something you can rely on. You don't need to know all of the details of how it works, right? Unless you're the builder of that platform, but you can rely on the platform. You can build on top of it. And it's this concept of elegance is best achieved through simplicity. And if you think about that, even within your life, if you can be a platform for other people, they can rely on you. You're consistent in how you respond and you engage. You're thoughtful. It's more than just from a technical side, but within the entire organization. So as you take this products and platforms, it's building in a composable architecture structure. Build a Lego block that does one thing really, really well. Document it, outline it, and be aware of the different use cases people are going to use your Lego block, and then build a whole bunch of them and assemble a Lego castle. And when somebody comes along and says, hey, that's a cool castle, but I want a turret over here, guess what? You know what turret Lego blocks are, and you just assemble that way. You don't have to build very many new things. It's more of a configuration side of things. So with this space, as you imagine, we started in auto lending, and an auto loan looks like this. But we had customers come to us and we're like, well, I don't really want to compete. I don't want to create my own competitor. So if you do loans of another flavor, then you can use our software. That's cool. And well, we learned a lot, and that turned out to be a major inflection point for us. Because when you take an auto loan, or let's go like polar opposite on the spectrum. Let's take like a student loan, a consumer-based student loan, certain regulations, certain ways the interest works and things, and the opposite end, a B2B like invoice factoring or merchant cash advance, right? You think those are like wildly different. And if you look at them from the perspective of origination or underwriting, you'd be right. The user experience is way different on a merchant cash advance than it is on a student loan. Where they get it, how they fill it out, the experience they're supposed to have. But if you get to the point of decision through the rest of the life of the loan, they're like 70, 80% the same, right? You got to keep track of somebody who owes you money. You have the policy enforcements. You have to keep track of the borrower and all the communications and your audit trail and your notes and documents and blah, blah, blah. All these things you keep track of on it. So in that delta of 20 to 30%, what can you build that's configuration? And that's what we ended up doing. We were just really blessed in how the process worked, that we built a configuration first platform out of necessity. And it turns out other people had the same problem as us, but they gave loans of different flavors, right? They gave a loan that was a hard money loan or a solar loan or a credit card or this or that. And we said, oh, great. Let me approach it from this framework. What can we do to leverage the platform that we've built, and then multiple products launched on the same platform? So that hopefully that's helpful beyond just a technology side, but how do you build these Lego blocks and move it within the organization?
Okay, great. Principle number 6, create a circle of trust. Yes, that's us when we were little. Yes, I'm the bigger one in the middle. Great. So this year was an interesting year for us as little kids. I remember this summer, we had 2 big trees in our backyard, and we decided that we wanted to fly. Yeah, and we were pretty serious. We wanted to fly, but we didn't really know how to fly or the science behind it, or even if there was any. So we devised a plan, and we ended up putting a pulley in the tree that was about 3 stories high. And we put handlebars on one side of a rope, and then we put the rope through the pulley, and then we put a bunch of weights, like bench pressing weights, on the other side of the rope. And we figured if we put about half the amount of weights as the human on the floor, if you're in the tree, you could grab the handlebars and come down slowly. And it worked great. We had all kinds of fun with this. We even ended up like getting a poster board and writing big letters on it and getting smaller and smaller, and then inviting our neighbors to come in the backyard, and they would see it and they would squat over to try to read the small things, and then the person would jump out of the tree and try to land on them, right? But then we got a little bit bored with going down. We wanted to shoot up. And so I figured, hey, well, if we have half the weight to go down, maybe we just double the weight and we go up. Well, that was a lot of weight. So we brought the weight up in the tree, and I figured, okay, we can't get all this weight. So here's what we'll do. I will sit on the weight, and I will hold the rope between my legs. And it's kind of scary because I'm 3 stories up. So we'll put a mattress on the grass in case I fall too fast. I'll land on the mattress. And then my brother Rhett and my brother Ben, they'll hold the handlebars on the other side, and Ben will let go, and Rhett can have this flying experience that we've all wanted so bad. And so that's what we did. I climbed up the tree, pushed the weight off, sat on it, and I'm holding the rope, and I'm like, okay, go! And Ben lets go. And Rhett shoots straight up while I fall straight down, crash on that mattress, and I see him hit the branch, break both of his wrists, fly over the branch, and just fly 3 stories down, hit the grass, and bounce off the grass. And that's when I knew that I wasn't an engineer. And he was knocked out cold. And so we're like, oh no, what's going on? We ended up loading him up and into my mother's van. We're driving to the hospital. She had to hit on the brakes, and he ended up falling off the bench with 2 broken arms. And it was crazy. We ended up getting to the hospital. And I remember after he had a double cast on, we're sitting in a hospital room, and there's a curtain between us. My mom goes on the side where Rhett is, and my brother Ben and I are on the other side. We're just kind of being quiet. And he's crying. He's young. You can see him there. He looks like he would cry a lot. And my mom's like, oh, are you okay? This or that? Hasn't the medicine kicked in yet? And he's like, no, I'm feeling much better. But he's still crying. So she ends up asking him, okay, well, why are you still crying? And he says, without knowing that we're on the other side of the curtain, Lloyd and Ben think that they did this to me. So I learned a couple lessons from that. First, stick to your own lane of what you're good at. I'm more on the sales and the revenue side. My brother Ben, he's more on the operation side. Rhett's more on the innovation and product side. And then also building a circle of trust with your most intimate partners. It's a big deal. Right? It's not only a big deal to make like you're going to war together and you're on the same team with the common enemy. That's a big part. But it also eliminates a lot of sideways work, right? That pointless bureaucracy of who's trying to climb the ladder faster and who stepped on who to elevate themselves. All that's gone because you know that your counterparts have your back and you know that you have their back. And so it's more than just 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. It equals something greater than 3 if you truly build that circle of trust.
I'd say on this one as well, I did survive that one. But as you think about winning alone is lonely. How many people are really happy for you, right? But losing alone is devastating. It's really hard to lose alone. So in our case, when you win, you're like, "Whoa, I feel like a win. What's better than owning something? Owning a third of it. It's perfect, right?" And if you lose, you're like, "I only lost a third of it," right? So building a team that you have that relationship with, back to the prior principle of having this trust allows you to take that strategic risk. Definitionally, you don't know. But if you're so worried about sideways work, you can never really take a risk. If your job's always on the line, if you make one mistake, you're not really going to try anything. That's way too scary. It's super hard. So building an environment, not only do you have a circle of trust, but the culture of the organization is that strategic risk, and if it doesn't turn out the way you want it, as long as you properly take that information, feed it into a feedback loop, that's a fine thing. People who are willing and are supported in being wrong learn much faster and build product much faster. And they feel comfortable in what they're doing. And so extending that trust within the culture of the organization. We're all humans and we're building cool technology, but we're also influenced by the human side to it. If you live in an environment where you're trusted and you trust those around you, you can build a lot cooler things a lot faster than if you're worried about the other side to it. And then our final principle.
Okay, number 7, communicate value. This is kind of hard to do when there's little value to communicate early on in the days, right? So it can be a little bit of a chicken and an egg argument here. In the early days of our software business, look, the software wasn't very great. How could it be, right? But it was still my job to sell it. And so in month 1 of attempting this in the back of a trailer at a car dealership, I sold 3. And then in month 2, I sold 4. And in month 3, I sold 3. And man, I was trying. I was just not doing very good. And our price point was super low, right? Because we just wanted to get some recurring revenue. And so it was very entry level on the price. And then we had a business meeting, and my partners and brothers are like, yeah, maybe we should hang up the towel on this one. It's not really working. So I said, hey, guys, give me 1 more month. Let's see what we can do, and let's have that conversation then. So I tried something. I added a 0 to all the price, 10 times the price. And that month, I sold 14. So we added 10 times the cost to the activation fee and the monthly reoccurring fee, and we more than 4 times the amount of sales that we had. That's interesting. It was the same crappy software at that time, right? But it's about not the value, it's about the perceived value. A lender is like, yeah, I'm not going to buy that software. It's too cheap. It's likely not going to do what I need it to do. But when we 10x the price, they said, this likely has the value that I need to have. So just remember that when you're communicating value, it's the value that the consumer's looking for. It's not necessarily the value that you want them to find.
On a technical side, an example of how to communicate value. We had a challenge. We built a SaaS platform, and it works really well to sell into people who are like cool with technology and understand the details of it. But as you get into selling into organizations that are used to operating with an on-prem solution, they're like, what? You want me to move the cloud and I'm not in control anymore? Like, that's going to be like, how do we do that, right? So think of like, go sell to a regional bank. And they're used to running, they have this whole like floor or entire building that's used to running their hardware and the organization they've built. And it's a pretty big pill to swallow to move to the cloud and no longer be in charge of everything. And we're selling an operating core to manage the loan. So we're like their operating system. It's not just you're looking up a data fetch from us at one piece of a workflow. We're the operating system. It's a pretty big decision for them. So as we got through, how do we communicate the value of this? A SaaS platform works really well for smaller scale sized organizations who have less of an opinion. But as you have more of an opinion, we thought, well, from a prior block, the prior principle of the Lego blocks on a platform and products, we thought, what can I do to sell into a regional bank who has a lot of opinion on these things? Well, we built out our entire infrastructure as code. Think of like Terraform, but all the pipelines, everything, all the microservices, all of it as code. So we created for some customers, for our larger customers, we do something we call private SaaS or PSaaS. And we take the entire infrastructure as code, create a new root account in AWS, and deploy the whole kit and caboodle. And they still operate in a SaaS environment, but they're the only customer in that SaaS. And that way they can get really comfortable with it. That way we can do things like, what is your opinion on your auto scaling rules? What is your opinion on tolerances and so forth? So as we're able to communicate the value, you got to sit in the seats on both sides of the table. What do they value? And why? The prior discussion that was in here talked about the site reliability engineering and getting into 5 whys and stuff. You got to get a few levels deep to understand your customer and what is it that they see value in. And it turns out all of us pay lots of money to alleviate pain, right? Where something's super painful, there's a lot of money sitting right there. And so if we can build solutions, but you first have to understand what causes pain and why, kind of requires to walk a mile in their shoes. And that's been one of the secrets for us. We sat in the shoes as the lender. We gave loans, like to the point, kind of to the extreme. Like if the borrower didn't make their payment, my family didn't eat. Well, you kind of want a good operating system, so you're going to collect the money. So my wife had grocery dollars. And so I have a deep understanding, and it kind of builds all of those principles that we've outlined there. and then you communicate that value. Another example is sandbox, right? As you build out, we're a multi-tenanted environment in SaaS, right? As you build out a sandbox for people, turns out we thought something that we do super cool. We're like, we have a massive amount of value here. People weren't seeing the value. And the thing we thought was super cool is not only am I going to provide you another tenant as a sandbox, fully permissioned, 100% provision to run everything like it's a production tenant, move real money in the real world, do real everything. What folks, it wasn't being communicated properly because it wasn't an apples to apple. A lot of folks would view a sandbox as like a development sandbox that's curtailed down to limited functionality and you can only do these 10 things in it. When we gave 3 options, turns out lots of value is seen in a full pre-prod sandbox. But when you give just one option of sandbox and not understanding, oh, you can do a development sandbox, you can do a traditional sandbox, and you can do a pre-prod sandbox, people are willing to pay for when they understand in comparative analysis on that. So communicating the value properly that way. All right, so we went through our 7 principles, but we want to do a little bit of a bonus. Hopefully this is helpful for you. An exercise and a journey that we've been on is when you're small, bootstrap business, really I think for any business, but when you're small, the management methodology and style you can go about would resonate with words like an individual's capacity, brute force, right? This idea of just grit, just make it happen. I don't know, pound your Red Bulls and stay up for 3 days to make the thing happen, right? All of us have done that. All of us have experienced it. But that kind of stops working 2 links away. The sphere of influence, when you got a couple hundred people, it's kind of hard to have your energy and grit work beyond 1 or 2 links from you. So how do you build an organization that will modify as you grow in headcount, that you will be unified? And it turns out the strategy is actually relatively simple. It's the model that you need to have a unified vision of what you're trying to achieve, and people need to buy into it. So here we share what LoanPros is, where we have our vision at the top, the concept of a platform and innovation in the future of finance. The slogan describes this journey. Could be for us as an individual, could be for our own company, it could be as we're supporting our customers, but it's resulting in the becoming process, shows by iteration. And then instead of doing like a customer objective, or like the idea that, hey, this quarter I'm going to achieve this thing, right? All of us do this concept of quarterly objectives, but if we even think of like just the English language of it, that's like something I'm going to try hard to do this month or this quarter. But if I swap out the word to a commitment, I don't really care how hard it is. I will do that. I've committed to it. If I use the language of Lloyd, I commit to, I'll figure it out, whatever I got to do to make that happen. So as a company, we've moved from objectives to commitments, and we do 3, right? We commit for a customer delight. We commit for a LoanPro team member, their own becoming journey. And we commit to this concept of sustainable growth. It's a 3-legged stool, right? A customer might be super delighted if they have to pay me nothing, but I can't provide a LoanPro becoming journey and the sustainable growth at the same time. So it's a 3-legged stool. You got to do all 3 of those. And this resonates with people. And I'm just going to slide just a couple of these. How do you actually do it? Right? So this quote on the left-hand side, D. Hawk, founder of Visa, wrote a book called One from Many. One of my favorite books. It's you can't even get it on Audible. You got to buy the actual hard copy to read this thing. But it's an interesting book, and it brings up this concept of the words of ought to be. And so we have this idea that, okay, if we have a shared vision, how do we go about achieving that vision? And we've built these guardrails, this concept of this is what we believe. In our company, we believe these things. And if it resonates with our team members, with our customers, this is the playbook of how we do stuff. So as you scale from a small company to a much larger headcount, if you have a code of conduct, like this is how you do stuff, turns out if people make rules within these guardrails, I approve. I don't need to be involved in every little nitty gritty detail that's occurring. Live within the guardrails. So you see things like believing that elegance is best achieved through simplicity, right? Being good stewards of resources, of time, talent, and treasure, committing to becoming experts in our craft and aspiring for mastery. If you don't commit and desire to be an expert in your craft and trying to be better, then it's probably not the right fit, because that's what we're trying to help our team members do, is the becoming journey. If you have no interest in the becoming journey, then you probably should spend your time somewhere that is aligned with what your beliefs are. So that we went through that journey and we highlight that. The last one I want to spend time on is we build each other as we build LoanPro. And if you think about that within your organization, one thing I'm really proud of is our team members like working at LoanPro. Right? The company's bigger than Lloyd, Ben, and I, or the founders, would ever be able to do by ourselves. Our team is building that. And they build some really cool stuff and have great, way better ideas than I would have. And so how do you foster and build a culture and community that excites them, that they wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning eager and excited about an idea that they had, and they jot it down, go back to sleep, and when they come into the office, they're going to like create a whole new business line of something super cool that didn't happen in my head, happened in their head, because we're unified and designed in that organization to do. So hopefully that is helpful. We do have a couple minutes if there's any questions for us to share on our bootstrap journey. So anybody have a question? Yeah, my lady.
I'd say that they started hard, and then they continued to be hard, and then they ended hard, and it's been hard all along, right? But that's we believe that the objective of business and the objective of this life is not ease and comfort, but it's that becoming process. It's the struggle. It's being comfortable in the struggle, and that's when that growth actually happens. So, love to say that that there's an easy phase somewhere in there. There's times of reprieve, but there's just new challenges as the business grows.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So for anyone who didn't hear the question, like as the business grew, like what was hard, and then what was like the inflection points it occurs, the way I heard it. And I don't think it gets easier. Your capacity increases, right? So I'm going to use another Bible example of David. So this is from, trying to just do a blank on the book, but the idea where it says with David and Goliath, where David was strengthened in the Lord. This idea that he learned how to fling a swing or a sling, and he was fighting lions and stuff. And when he went against Goliath, he had built a different skill set because he didn't live by the same exact rules, right? So he built out this skill. And so your capacity increases to tackle these battles that might have been a lot harder for you 5 years ago. But if that same thing shows up today, you're like, I got this. I'm fine, right? And I think all of us in the room have experienced that. So I would really focus on not how difficult something is, but how do you increase your capacity to deal with things? Yeah, great question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, in the back here. Wonderful. Great question. Yeah, so the question is, when you're building a team, how do you find people aligned that want to go through the becoming process and the principles I put up on there? And this has been a struggle, and the most successful thing we found is right at the beginning of the interview process, we share with them our list of beliefs. We say, this is who we are at LoanPro. But I'm not even going to ask you your technical skills in interview number one. Interview number one is, this is who we are and who we're trying to become. And if it resonates with you well, then we'll talk number two of what's your technical ability and your domain expertise and all of that kind of stuff. And that's been the most successful. It turns out a lot of our population hasn't spent a lot of time defining who they want to become. But when you articulate it to them, they go, oh, yeah, I need to think about that. I really do want to do that. And that's one of the most fulfilling pieces of running a business is that we can help provide the opportunity for people to become who they want, which first requires them to define who do they want to be. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just add that we're not perfect at it, and no organization is. But one thing that we've attempted to do is put a little bit of our money where our mouth is, and integrate our public charity Become More into the culture of LoanPro, so that in a lot of ways the culture is exactly the same. So we're taking them on fulfillment trips or service trips to Cambodia, so that they can actually have a paradigm shift with a +1 of theirs, and we're integrating those so that the long game for us personally can also, if desired, become the long game for our team members.
Yeah, great question. Sorry, there was another hand somewhere over here. All right. Yeah, go ahead. We ended up selling the car business, and we've seasoned out our book of business in the lending space as well, and exclusively software.
And every time me and my kids pass the car lots, we go, woohoo, no longer in the car business. Oh, they died a long time ago.
They only cost $199, so they lasted like 3 or 4 weeks. The perceived value wasn't there.
Yes, there in the back. Yeah, I'll start with that one. We hear that all the time too. 3 brothers, how do you do that? We could never do that. Well, we have some brothers we couldn't do it with as well. So you're not alone there. But this combo has worked out very well. We've actually also pulled in one of our older brothers that was a professor at a university to come be part of the charity, but he's not part of the software company. Really, I would say that I attempt to have my brother's back more than my own. And I know that they have my back more than their own, right? Back in the day when sometimes we didn't know if we were going to pay our mortgage, I was more concerned about making sure theirs were paid than my own, and vice versa. And we really felt that way. It wasn't just lip service. So it allowed us to not have to do any of that sideways work, because we really trusted each other when we went through the difficult times. And so when the times of plenty came, we got to enjoy it together.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it is pretty common to see the conflict there. What we've been able to build is just a relationship of trust, right? It doesn't require that you're related by blood, but it does require that you build from experience again and again and again that they're a platform, right? They deliver on what they say. If Lloyd commits something to me, great, I can move on. It's going to be taken care of. And it turns out that's a big problem of some kind. We're going to come back and figure out the details. And when you have people you can trust in that way, you can move pretty fast and you build that trust really well. So like our families do tons of stuff together, right? We have kids the same age, and my other brother's on a trip this week and his kids stay with my kids and my family for the week. And so it's just I like the concept because without getting too far on a tangent, I think one of the greatest lies of our generation is a term of work-life balance, right? It implies that you don't want to do the work that you do. It implies that you work so you can live the life you want. I think a much better term is a work-life integration. Like, your job should know you got a family and you got kids, and I'm trying to be a good dad. I'm trying to be a good husband. And that requires, sometimes I got to say, job, I'm going to go be a husband right now, right? But also, my family should know I've got a job. And so I think it's this concept of being a single reconciled person, and it's a work-life integration. I know that's not going to be a super popular view with everybody, but I get to live once. I'm going to do something I love to do, and my family's going to be involved in it. Yeah, great question.
Okay, maybe time for one more question. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for everybody's time today. Hopefully that was beneficial for you. Appreciate your time and attention.
Thank you so much.